Okay, we are back. Um, Went ahead and reset the modem, and apparently, yes, it was having a bit of a connection issue, so I had to do that. So, that's done. We should have a better, stronger connection. But let's continue on, shall we? Anyway, today in history. Let's see what we have. Well, if the computer will want to work with me. Still loading up stuff, so the little scroll bar keeps wanting to flip around. Ah, today in 622, Muhammad completes the Hijrah. On this date in 622, the Prophet Muhammad completes the Hijrah, or flight, from Mecca to Medina to escape persecution. In Medina, Muhammad set about building the followers to his religion, Islam, into an organized community and an Arabian power. Today in 1941, Japanese gather preliminary data on Pearl Harbor. So they started preparing the information to begin the attack on December the 6th, I believe it was. Meanwhile, World War One. Today in 1918, Bulgaria ceases ceasefire with the Allied powers. Let's see. Today in 1988, Ben Johnson wins gold temporarily. Canadian sprinter Ben Johnson runs the 100-meter dash in 9.79 seconds to win gold at the Summer Olympics in Seoul, South Korea. However, the win was temporary, and he tested positive for steroids 3 days later and was stripped of his medal. Today in 1964, the Warren Commission report was delivered to President Johnson. Ooh, got a yawn. I'm still trying to come to from napping earlier. Today in 1948, the Honda Motor Company is incorporated. So it's a company which started shortly after the end of World War II. And the first Supreme Court. The Judiciary Act of 1789 is passed by Congress and signed by President George Washington, establishing the Supreme Court of the United States as a tribunal made up of 6 justices, it's 11 now, who were to serve on the court until death or retirement. That day, President Washington nominated John Jay to preside as Chief Justice, and John Rutledge, William Cushing, John Blair, Robert Harrison, and James Wilson to be associate judges. On September the 26th, all 6 appointments were confirmed. Good luck trying to get 6 appointments confirmed today. If there are any more, they get suggested on partisan potential, like Kavanaugh is. The U.S. Supreme Court was established by Article 3 of the Constitution, which again, 1789. We won our independence in 1776. But you got to remember, in that window there of about 20 some years, about 20 years, because 1776 to 81, I believe the Revolutionary War was. And then for a period of 81 to 88, 89, something like that, we existed under the Articles of Confederation. We actually had one, he wasn't known as president, but one ruler before Washington, so. Anyway, that was Today in History. Today in History. But yeah. Now, we will continue on. And I know last Monday I was cut off when I was reading Native American folklore. I decided, since I only got a little bit into it and I got kind of cut off, we're going to do just art history first. Then we'll get into actual folklore. Because I have books on Native American folklore. I have books on Japanese folklore. Not sure what other kind of folklore I have. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and discuss art history. It'll only be volume 1 because that's the only book I have. But by Marilyn Stokstad and Michael Cawthorn. Cawthorn. Regardless, art history. This will be our cultural Monday lesson. We're going to start off with some art history. And we'll pick up Wednesday with more reading on can't remember what we was reading. Freakonomics. There we go. But kind of give you a peek at the image here on the first page. And there you go. It's called Spotted Horses and Human Hands. It is in the Pech Merle Cave in Dordogne, France. Horses, 25,000 to 24,000 BCE, and hands, around 15,000 BCE. They're painted on limestone. All right, so this starts off prehistoric art. Two horses are positioned back to back in the wall of the chamber of the Pech Merle Cave, located in France's Dordogne region. One of the horses is shown in detail at the left. Yeah. And the head of the horse follows the natural shape of the rock. Black dots surround areas of both horses and cover the bodies. At a later date, a large fish, 58 inches long and almost impossible to see, was painted in red on top of them. Yet the painters left more than the images of animals, fish, and geometric shapes. They left their own handprints in various places around the animals. These images, and most others hidden in the chambers at the ends of long, narrow passages within the cave, connect us to an almost unimaginably ancient world of 25,000 BCE. Prehistory includes all of the human existence before the emergence of writing, though long before that defining moment, people were carving objects, painting images, and creating shelters and other structures. 30,000 years ago, our ancestors were not making works of art, and there were no artists as we understand them today. They were flaking, chipping, and polishing flints into spear points, knives, and scrapers, not into sculptures. However pleasing these artifacts are to the eye and to the touch. Wall paintings, too, must have seemed vitally important to their makers in terms of everyday survival. For art historians, archaeologists, and anthropologists, prehistoric art provides a significant clue, along with fossils, pollen, and artifacts, to understanding early human life and culture. Although specialists continue to discover more about when and how these works were created, they may never be able to tell us why they were made. In fact, there may be no single meaning or use to any of these images on a cave wall. Cave art probably meant different things to different people who saw it, depending on their age, experience, and specific needs and desires. The sculpture Paintings and structures that survive are only a tiny fraction of what must have actually been created over the very long time span. The conclusions and interpretations drawn from them are only hypotheses, making prehistoric art one of the most speculative but exciting areas of art history. The Stone Age. How and when modern humans evolved is the subject of ongoing debate, but anthropologists now agree that the species called Homo sapiens appeared about 400,000 years ago, and that the subspecies to which we belong, Homo sapiens sapiens, usually refers to modern humans, evolved as early as 120,000 years ago. Based on archaeological evidence, it is clear that modern humans spread from Africa across Asia into Europe and finally into on to Australia and the Americas. This vast movement of people took place between 100,000 and 35,000 years ago. Scholars began the systematic study of prehistory only about 200 years ago. 19th century archaeologists, struck by the wealth of stone tools, weapons, and figures around or found at ancient sites, named the whole period of early human development the Stone Age. Today, researchers divide the Stone Age into Paleolithic, from the Greek paleo, meaning old, and lithos, stone, and Neolithic, from the Greek neo, meaning new. So it was Greek, not Latin, because I mentioned this earlier when we were talking on not Friday, but the Friday before's lesson, because they mentioned Paleolithic and Neolithic. So the Paleolithic period is divided into three phases, reflecting the relative position of objects found in the layers of excavation. Lower, the oldest; middle; and upper, the most recent. In some places, archaeologists can identify a transitional or Mesolithic, from the Greek meso, meaning middle period. The dates for the transition from Paleolithic to Neolithic vary with geography and the local environment and social circumstances. For some of the places discussed in this chapter, such as Western Europe, the Neolithic way of living did not emerge until around 3000 BCE. In others, such as the Near East, it appeared as early as 8000 BCE. Archaeologists marked time in so many years ago, or BP, before present. However, to ensure consistent style throughout the book, which reflects the usage of art historians, this chapter uses BCE, before the Common Era, and CE, the Common Era, to mark time, which is usually still the same as BC and AD. Just so some of you don't get too confused. Much is yet to be discovered about prehistoric art. In Australia, some of the world's very oldest images have been dated to, to between 50,000 and 40,000 years ago, and the tradition of transient communities who mark the land in complex yet stunningly beautiful ways continues into historical time. In western Arnhemland, rock art images of the rainbow serpent have their origins in prehistory and were perhaps first created during times of substantial changes in the environment. Africa, as well, is home to ancient rock art in both northern and southern regions. In all cases, archaeologists associate arrival of modern humans in these regions with the advent of image making. So, we kind of start on that discussion. Indeed, it is the cognitive capability to create and recognize symbols and imagery that sets us modern humans apart from all of our predecessors and from all of our contemporary animal relatives. We are defined as a species by our abilities to make and understand art. This chapter focuses primarily on the rich traditions of prehistoric European art from the Paleolithic and Neolithic periods into the Bronze Age. Later chapters consider the prehistoric art of other continents and cultures, such as Americas and Sub-Saharan Africa. The Rainbow Serpent Rock. Western Arnhem in Australia, appearing in Australia as early as 6000 BCE. Images of the rainbow serpent play a role in rituals and legends in the creation of human beings, the generation of rains, storms, and floods, and the reproductive power of nature and people. And there's the image. Get a better view of the rainbow serpent. Researchers found that human beings made tools long before they made what today we call art. Art, in the sense of image making, is the hallmark of the Upper Paleolithic period and the emergence of our subspecies, Homo sapiens sapiens. Representational images are seen in the archaeological record beginning around 38,000 BCE in Australia, Africa, and Europe. Before that time, during the Lower Paleolithic period in Africa, early humans made tools by flaking and chipping, or knapping, flint pebbles into blades and scrapers with sharp edges. Dating to 2.5 million years ago, the earliest objects made by our human ancestors were simple stone tools, some with sharp edges that were used to cut animal skin and meat and to bash open bones to access marrow, and also to cut wood and soft plant materials. These first tools have been found at sites such as Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania. Although not art, they are important as they document a critical development in our evolution, humans' ability to transform the world around them into specific tools and objects that could be used to complete a task. And they show a map of um, early Europe as the Ice Age glaciers receded. Paleolithic, Neolithic, Bronze Age, and Iron Age settlements increased from north to south. And like I said, it's just mainly a map of Europe. By 1.65 million years ago, or by 1.65 million years ago, significant changes in our ancestors' cognitive abilities and manual dexterity can be seen in sophisticated stone tools, such as the teardrop shaped hand axes that have been found at sites across Eurasia. These extraordinary objects, symmetrical in form and produced by a complex multi step process, were long thought of as nothing more than human tools, or perhaps even as weapons. But the most recent analysis suggests that they had a social function as well. Some sites at Logersee, Logersee, I'm sorry for the butchering of the name, Logersee in Kenya contain, contain hundreds of hand axes, far more than would have been needed in functional terms, suggesting that they served to announce an individual's skills, status, and standing in his or her community. Although these ancient hand axes are clearly not art in the representational sense, it is important to see them in terms of performance and process concepts that, although central to modern Western art, also have deep prehistoric roots. It's killing my shoulder. There we go. Evolutionary changes took place over time, and by 400,000 years ago, during the late Middle Paleolithic period, a Homo sapiens subspecies called Neanderthal inhabited Europe. Its members used a wider range of stone tools and may have carefully buried their dead with funerary offerings. Neanderthals survived for thousands of years and overlapped with modern humans, though the two groups did not interbreed, although that's later thought. They didn't interbreed in great numbers, but there were some interbreeding. Homo sapiens sapiens, who had evolved and spread out of Africa some 300,000 years after the Neanderthals, eventually replaced them, probably between 38,000 and 33,000 BCE. The critical abilities that set modern humans apart from all their predecessors were cognitive ones. Indeed, the fact that Homo sapiens sapiens, as a species, outlasted Neanderthals was because they had mental capacity to solve problems of human survival. The new cognitive abilities included improvements in recognizing and benefiting from variations in the natural environment and managing social networking and resilience making skills that enabled organized hunting. The most important new ability, however, was the capacity to think symbolically, to create representational analogies between one person, animal, and object and another, and to recognize and remember those analogies. This cognitive development marks the evolutionary beginning of art. The world's earliest pieces of art come from South Africa. Two 37,000 or 77,000 year old engraved blocks of red ochre, probably used as crayons, found in the Blombus cave. Both the blocks are engraved in an identical way with cross-hatched lines on their sides. Archaeologists argue that the similarity of the engraved patterns means these two pieces were intentionally made and decorated following a common pattern. Thousands of fragments of ochre have been discovered at Blombus, and there is little doubt that there were people were using it to draw patterns and images, the remains of which have long since disappeared. Although it is impossible to prove, it is highly likely that the ochre was used to decorate people's bodies, as well as to color objects such as tools and shell ornaments. Indeed, it is an earlier layer on the same site. Archaeologists uncovered more than 36,000 shells, each of which had been perforated so that they could be hung from a string or thong or attached to clothing or a person's hair. These shells would have been used to decorate the body. An ostrich eggshell bead came from the same site and would have served the same purpose. The importance of the Blombus finds cannot be overstated. Here we have our early ancestors, probably modern humans, but possibly their predecessors, using the Earth's raw materials to decorate themselves with jewelry, with the shells and body art with the ochre. And then we have two pics here. One is Paleolithic hand axe from the Isimilia Korongo in Tanzania from 60,000 years ago. And below it, we have decorated ochre from the Blombus Cave, southern Cape Coast in South Africa, 77,000 years ago. Kind of give you a look at the two. But shelter or architecture. The term architecture has been applied to the enclosure of spaces with at least some aesthetic intent. Some people object to its use in connection with prehistoric improvisations, but building even a simple shelter requires a degree of imagination and planning deserving of the name architecture. In the upper paleo I cannot speak tonight for some reason. In the upper Paleolithic period, humans in some regions used great ingenuity to build shelters that were far from simple. In woodlands, evidence of floors indicate that circular or oval huts of light branches and hides were built. These measured as much as 15 to 20 feet in diameter. Modern tents to accommodate 6 people vary from 10 to 11 feet ovals to 14 by 7 foot rooms. So, I mean, they were almost double the size. In the treeless grasslands of Upper Paleolithic Russia and Ukraine, builders created settlements of up to 10 houses using the bones of now extinct woolly mammoth, whose long curving tusks made excellent roof supports and arched door openings. This bone framework was probably covered with animal hides and turf. Most activities centered around the inside fire pit or hearth, where food was prepared and tools were fashioned. Larger houses might have had more than one hearth, and spaces were set aside for specific uses. Working stone, making clothing, sleeping, and dumping refuse. Inside the largest dwelling in a site in Mazyrik, Ukraine, archaeologists found 15 small hearths that still contained ashes and charred bones left by the last occupants. Some people also colored their floors with powdered ochre in shades that ranged from yellow to red to brown. These Upper Paleolithic structures were important because of their early date. The widespread appearance of durable architecture concentrated in village communities did not occur until the beginning of the Neolithic period in the Near East and southeastern Europe. I'm telling you, I can't hardly speak today for some reason. Well, speak properly. But here we have a couple pictures as well. Reconstruction drawing of mammoth bone houses and lion human below that from the Hollenstein-Stadel, Germany, circa around 30,000 to 28,000 BCE. Mammoth is made from mammoth ivory and was 11 and 5/8 inches. It's in the Ulmer Museum in Ulm, Germany. But yeah, here you are for an example. There at the top, the mammoth huts, and at the bottom, the lion human. All right. As early as 30,000 BCE, small figures or figurines of people and animals made of bone, ivory, stone, and clay appeared in Europe and Asia. Today, we interpret such self contained three-dimensional pieces as examples of sculpture in the round. Perhaps carvers also produced relief sculpture in stone, bone, and ivory. In relief sculpture, the surrounding material is carved away, forming a background that sets off the projecting figure. The lion human. An early and puzzling example of sculpture is found in the human figure. In the round is a human figure, probably male, with a feline head, made around 30,000 to 26,000 BCE. Archaeologists excavating at Hollenstein Stadel, Germany, found broken pieces of ivory from a mammoth tusk that they realized were parts of an entire figure. Nearly a foot tall, this remarkable statue surpasses most early figurines in size and complexity. Instead of copying what he or she saw in nature, the carver created a unique creature, part human and part beast. Was the figure intended to represent a person wearing a ritual lion mask? Or has the man taken on the appearance of an animal? Archaeologists now think that the people who lived in this time held very different ideas from our 20th or 21st century ones about what it meant to be human and how humans were distinct from animals. It is quite possible that they thought of animals and humans as part of a common group of beings who shared the world. What is absolutely clear is that the lion human shows highly complex thinking and creative imagination. The uniquely human ability to conceive and represent a creature never seen in nature. And here we have a small box, art and its context, the power of naming. Words are only symbols for ideas, and it is no coincidence that the origins of language and of art are often linked in the evolutionary development. But the very words we invent or our ancestors invented reveal a certain view of the world and can shape our thinking. Today, we exert the power of naming when we select a name for a baby or call a friend by a nickname. Our ideas about art can also. I lost my place. Our ideas about art can also be affected by names, even the ones used for captions in a book. Before the 20th century, artists usually did not name or title their works. Names were eventually supplied by the work's owners or by art historians writing about them, and thus often express the cultural prejudices of the labelers or of the times in which they lived. An excellent example of such distortion is the names given to the hundreds of small prehistoric statues of women that have been found. Earlier scholars called them by the Roman name Venus. For example, the sculpture in figure 1-7 was called the Venus of Willendorf. after the place where it was found, using the name of the Roman goddess of love and beauty, sent a message that the figure was associated with religious belief, that it represented an ideal womanhood, and that it was one of a long line of images of classical feminine beauty. In short time, most similar works of sculptures from the Upper Paleolithic period came to be known as Venus figures. The name was repeated so often that even experts began to assume that the statues had to be fertility figures and mother goddesses, although there is no proof this was so. Our ability to understand and interpret works of art creatively is easily compromised by distracting labels. Um, Calling a prehistoric figure a woman instead of Venus encourages us to think about the sculpture in a new and different way. And speaking of the Venus of Willendorf, or woman from Willendorf, as it has here in the subtext, it was from Austria, circa 24,000 BCE. It's made of limestone, 4 3/8 inches or 11 centimeters. Um, Nature or Naturhistorisches Museum in Vienna. There's a picture of it. Female figures. While a number of figurines representing women have been found recently, most human figures from the Upper Paleolithic period are female. The most famous of these are the woman from Willendorf, um, from Austria, dates to about 24,000 BCE. Carved from limestone and originally colored with red ochre, the statuette's swelling, rounded forms make it seem larger than the actual 4 3/8 inch height. The sculptor exaggerated the figure's female attributes by giving it pendulous breasts, a big belly with a deep navel, a natural indentation in the stone, wide hips, dimpled knees and buttocks, and solid thighs. By carving a woman with a well nourished body, the artist may have been expressing health and fertility, which could ensure the ability to produce strong children, thus guaranteeing the survival of the clan. The most recent analysis of the Paleolithic female sculptures has replaced the traditional fertility interpretation with more nuanced understandings of how and why the human figure is represented in this way, and who may have had these kinds of objects made. According to the archaeologist Clive Gamble, these little sculptures were subtle forms of nonverbal communications among small, isolated groups of Paleolithic people spread out across vast regions. Gamble noticed the tremendous and unusual similarity in the shapes of figures, even those found in widely distant parts of Europe. He suggested that when the groups of the Paleolithic hunter gatherers did occasionally meet up and interact, the female statues may have been among several signature objects that signaled whether a group was friendly and acceptable for interaction and probably for mating. As symbols, these figures would have provided reassurance of shared values about the body, and their size would have demanded engagement at a close personal level. It is not a coincidence, then, that the largest production of these types of Paleolithic figurine occurred during a period when the climatic conditions were at their worst, and the need for interaction and alliance building would have been at the greatest. More provocative is art historian Leroy McDermott's suggestion that the body shape of the female figures tell us a great deal about who made them. Noticing the bulbous shape of the figures and the fact that many do not have clearly defined feet, McDermott argued that the perspective was that of a pregnant woman looking down at her own body. McDermott's theory that the figures were sculpted by pregnant women and were depictions of their own bodies offers an intriguing vision of women as artists in control of how they were represented. And again, we have two more pictures here. The top one says, Woman from Dolny Vestonsk, which is from Moravia, Czech Republic, 23,000 BCE. It's made from fired clay, 4 1/4 by 1 7/10 inches, or 11 by 4.3 centimeters, and currently resides in the Moravsky Museum in Brno, Czech Republic. The lower image is the woman from Brasempouy, and it's from Grotte du Pape, Brasempouy, Landes, France. Probably circa 30,000 BCE. It's made of ivory, is 1 1/4 inches, or 3.6 centimeters. Musée des Antiquités Nationales, Saint-Germain in Laye, France is where it resides. And another figure found in the Czech Republic, the woman from Dolní Věstonice, takes our understanding of these objects further still. The site of Dolní Věstonice is important because it marks a very early date, 23,000 BCE, for humans to use fire and make durable objects out of mixtures of water and soil. What makes the figurines or the figures from this site and those from other sites in this region, Pavlov and Predmosty, unusual is their method of manufacture by mixing the soil with water to a very particular recipe and then placing the wet figures in a hot kiln to bake. The makers were not intending to create durable, well-fired statues. On the contrary, the recipe used and the firing procedure followed tell us that the intention was to make the figures implode in the kiln before the firing process was complete, or explode in the kilns before the firing process was complete, and before a successful figure could be produced. Indeed, the finds at these sites support this interpretation. There are very few complete figures, but numerous fragments that bear the traces of explosions at high temperatures. The Dolní Věstonice fragments are records of performance and process art in their rawest and earliest forms. Another remarkable female image discovered in the Grotte du Pape in Brassempoy, France, is the tiny ivory head known as the woman from Brassempoy, which again was the lower image we saw. Though the binders did not record its archaeological context, recent studies provide it to be authentic and date as early as 30,000 BCE. The carver captured the essence of a head, of what psychologists tell or call the memory image. Those generalized moments that reside in our standard memory of a human head. An egg-shaped rests atop the long neck, and an engraved square patterning may be hair or a headdress. The image is an abstraction. What has come to be known as abstract art. The reduction of shapes and appearances in basic yet recognizable forms that are not intended to be exact replications of nature. The result in this case looks uncannily modern to the contemporary viewer. Today, when such a piece is isolated in a museum case as a book illustration, we enjoy it as an aesthetic object, but we lose its original cultural context. I think I'm going to stop there because the next section is cave painting. My back's killing me. But there's a little bit of art history. It kind of started off for our Monday education. So I hope you learned a lot. I learned my mouth did not want to cooperate with me today. So I apologize for any garbled reading. Besides, my shoulder is killing me. My back's killing me, even though I've got pillows behind them. But I'm going to get off here. Before I do, educate thyself. Read, think, study, learn. We all, no matter how much we think we know, could always stand to know more. Or re-review subjects to find that we may have made a mistake on what we was thinking of before. So, love you guys. Appreciate you for showing up. I'll try to be on tomorrow. And I'll try to have the territories flags be up some point this week. Just didn't get it filmed and edited, so. But I'll see you then. You all take care. Later.